Welcome to mini lecture 7.3 for chapter 7 on ethnicity, talking about why ethnicities clash. Really, an effort in this section, we're going to talk about ethnic conflict as it exists. We're going to look at some specific examples and what's happened as a result. So, when we're starting to talk about what's causing conflict as we're looking at these examples today, I really want to make sure you're able to differentiate between religious groups and ethnic groups in terms of what's causing the conflict. There are many occasions where both are going to be involved, as in many of the cases you'll see today, but you need to be able to understand the difference between the two and what's causing it. Okay. What usually leads to this kind of an ethnic conflict is a competition to be the most dominant nationality, therefore to be the one group that oversees the rest of the country. There are 4 examples we're going to look at today. We're going to take a look at 3 of examples are from one region of the world, that's East Africa, right near the Horn, which is talking about Ethiopia and Eritrea, Sudan, and Somalia. We'll also take a look at Lebanon as a specific example as well. So let's start first with Ethiopia and Eritrea. This is probably one of the fiercest ethnic conflicts in Africa, is just trying to understand this particular region and what's going on here. Ethiopia itself was given control of Eritrea after World War II in about 1950. That control was granted to it by the United Kingdom. And when Ethiopia took control of Eritrea, and bear in mind we're talking about this strip of land along the Red Sea. For Ethiopia, they're landlocked. So they're going to need the access to the sea, and as a result, when they gained that access, they took it, and as a result gave Eritrea very little autonomy or self-determination. They dissolved their legislature, they banned the use of their language, they immediately made them, in effect, second-class citizens within the country. This resulted in a 30-year civil war from 1961 to 1991. Eventually it ended when the rest of the international community stepped in and helped Eritrea to gain its independence in 1993. There were 9 ethnic groups that made up Eritrea, but they were bonded by the war and therefore bonded together to form their own nation state. Now, Ethiopia itself today is controlled by a combination of ethnicities, but what's become the more overarching theme in Ethiopia is not ethnicity but religion, as many people within Ethiopia have converted to Islam, especially in the 1990s, so much so that the Muslims kind of gained power over the country, really changing it from an ethnic conflict to a more of a religious conflict. This is one of those ones that is still a little bit ongoing. We're not seeing as much action here, but it does flare up on occasion, so it's an area that we have to pay attention to. Okay, looking at the Sudan, this is another one of those issues. It's actually both ethnic and religious. On one side you had black Christian and animist rebels, especially in the south of Sudan, as well as the Arab Muslims in the north. And we've talked about the spread of Islam through Africa, and as it spread further and further south, this is the kind of conflict that kind of arises as a result. The government truly in Sudan caused everything. What wound up happening is that an Islamic group came to power, and when they gained power, they tried to force Islam as one across-the-board nationality. They adopted laws that were very similar to Sharia that segregated the sexes in public. This kind of opened the door to larger conflicts and led to an ethnic war erupting in Darfur, which is in the western provinces of the Sudan. Okay, so we're looking at a secondary conflict that erupts, and really we're dealing with a larger humanitarian issue at work, what could potentially be termed off as genocide, and we don't really have the time to get into Darfur specifically at this point. We're going to discuss a lot of these kinds of conflicts later on when we talk about political geography in Unit 4. What we essentially are seeing here are black farmers in Darfur. They were being crushed by the Arab nomads as they were moving into the region. This group was known as the Janjaweed, and as a result, as they were being crushed, they started to literally target certain groups, and we've led to a deeper ethnic conflict, and we'll talk about that in the next section. South Sudan itself finally fought this war against the Arab Muslims in the north, and in July 2011 gained independence and became the newest state on the planet, which is South Sudan, which gained independence July 9th, 2011. And so now we have Sudan, and Sudan, which is a Arabic Muslim, more religiously driven nation, and then the black Christians and the animists in the south. We'll speak very quickly about Somalia before we move on. A lot of what led to the conflict and war in Somalia was, again, Islam. Most people are Sunni Muslims in this region, but it was divided into clans and sub-clans. And because of this organization, all these areas were formed into one country. And as a result, when you have a situation where all these groups are forced to combine into one country, it opens the door for a lot of potential conflict. And that's the conflict we saw in movies such as Black Hawk Down. Won't get into showing, and we definitely will not show Black Hawk Down in class, but this gives you a little bit of a better idea. I do also want to focus on Lebanon, because Lebanon's internal conflict had a lot to do more with religious groups than just ethnic groups. About 60% of the population in Lebanon was Muslim. 2/3 of that group were Shiite Muslims, which means that they're, remember, as we've discussed earlier, a little more stringent. There's a particular group involved too that was leading the Muslim groups called Hezbollah, which was a both political party and a armed group. They refer to themselves as the Party of God. 30% of the nation is Christian, 10% are other. 7% of the population also considers themselves to be Druze. Druze is a combination of both Islam and Christianity, and this creates some additional issues in Lebanon. The government was divided by religion, according to the percentages from the 1932 census. So they took the census data from 1932 and forced that every government from that point on should be based on those percentages. So based on those, Muslims would gain a certain percent, Christians a certain percent, Druze a certain percent. In 1932, Christians were the majority, but by modern times, Muslims had overtaken it. Now, as a result, because of that ongoing overtaking, you had Muslims who wanted more political power, even though Christians were granted that political power by the 1932 Constitution. This has led to some more conflict within Lebanon and a bit of a civil war within Lebanon as well. It has overspilled into other regions. Another reason that ethnicities do clash are because that ethnicities occasionally get divided amongst more than one state. We'll take a look at two such groups. Kashmir, which is at its core an ethnic and religious debate, and then Sri Lanka, both on the Indian subcontinent in South Asia. When we're talking about Kashmir, India, which is again more Hindu based, and Pakistan, which is more Muslim, these two groups have been fighting each other since the year 1000. In 1000, a Muslim general named Mahmud led raids into regions of India from what is now Afghanistan, and as a result, the two groups have kind of been at each other's throats ever since. When the British were controlling really both regions, the Muslims who were living in Pakistan and in area now known as Kashmir believed that the British favored the Hindus, and because they favored the Hindus over the Muslims, they were going to give them more power, more ability. What essentially happens is that when both India and Pakistan gain their independence, a region known as Kashmir, which is in the north of India, is given to India instead of to Pakistan. And what this caused as a result is an ongoing conflict where the majority of the population of Kashmir is Muslim, whereas the majority of India is Hindu. As a result, you have a lot, and what we see on the map here, a movement outside of India. And as you can see, primarily Muslims are moving out of India into Pakistan, Hindus out of Pakistan into India. Again, really the flows are heading Muslims into Pakistan, even in some cases into Bangladesh, and Hindus into India. There is set up by the British and set up by the international authorities, a line of control. Pakistan controls the northwest of that particular line. India controls to the south and east. The Muslims are the majority of Kashmir. They've fought a guerrilla war to try and regain control. India and Pakistan have now fought 3 wars over this region, and thankfully neither one has turned nuclear, even though both India and Pakistan have nuclear weapons. So there's still fighting in this region. We'll see news stories on occasion of slight skirmishes along these borders. There is no true peace solution here, but this one's more ethnic in nature than is religious, although we're seeing a little bit of both come to the surface. The other group is in Sri Lanka, where we see really 2 groups, and they're both ethnic and religious in perspective. The Sinhalese, as an ethnic group who are Buddhist, and the Tamils, who are Hindu. Now, the Sinhalese compose about 74% of the population, Tamils only about 18%, but the 2 groups have been fighting each other now since about 1983, so a 30-year plus conflict. The dispute itself is 2,000 years old, but when the Europeans were controlling the region, they were really able to keep a cork in it. This is, again, one region that needs to be looked at for an ongoing conflict to try and see it solved between the Sinhalese and the Tamils. Alright, that's all for ethnic conflict. We'll talk a little bit about ethnic cleansing in Section 4.